So now, for a man who needs no introduction, that's what he says, but I'm going to tell you. If there is anyone in the world who is more of an expert on Opal Whiteley than Steve Williamson, we haven't found them. And so I feel really fortunate that he comes and talks to us about Opal. So without further ado, I'm going to let it to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you all for coming here on Saturday morning. I've got a lot of material to cover, but I promise you I will get you out in time for the Ducks game.
Oh.
Everything I'm going to show you tonight is based on my webpage, opalnet.org. So you want to be sure to write that website down, opalnet.org, because you can go on there and you can see, we can't for some reason get the nice full screen of the webpage up there that's got a couple of really nice pictures of Opal at the very top. So, but here is just below the top, the brand new park. Thank you, Grant. We used to live next door to Grant and his family, great neighbors too. Starting, was it last year, Karen, my wife, and I, and my friend Tom Romano, he's here, there, we sat down and we were going to try to do an anthology of Opal Whiteley's writings, take a few over the years, and I would write text notes for them. Now then we got to looking at the fairyland around us, and for some really bad idea, but I got the idea that I should edit the fairyland around us for a new generation, put in all these text notes. So Tom and I and Tara, we spent months working on an edited version of the fairyland around us. We had hundreds of these comments that you'll see in these other PDFs. And unfortunately, though, I wasn't real happy with the result of it. And I talked to Opal Whiteley fans and they didn't like me at all editing the fairyland around us. So, but while we were doing that, we noticed also the same thing that I think Ellery Sedgwick at the Atlantic Monthly noticed. One reason I wanted to talk down here is when I say Ellery Sedgwick at the Atlantic Monthly, almost all of you know who I mean. If I give a talking Eugene, I'm going to stop and tell who they were. I love talking to the Cottage Grove Historical Society, because this is the most knowledgeable group of Opal fans and people interested in her. We noticed that maybe a third of the book, The Fairyland Around Us, is composed of diary entries. And they are they're kind of maddeningly without dates. A few years ago, until recently, it was hard to find the Fairyland around us. There are less than 50 copies known. They're in the hands of museums, libraries, collectors. And now with the internet, it's been completely scanned and put online. This is the copy from Boston Library that she gave somebody in November 1918, which is, by the way, this is the 100th year of the Fairyland around us. Now, one of the things we noticed flipping through the book was how many, this is a chapter called Along the Road. Now, I know you guys can't see it too well, but these are just filled with diary dates. And so I became really interested in what in the diary, and it was frustrating because she'd start in chronological order, like June, July, August, suddenly jump back to April, go back to August, go back to July, and this showed that she never really finished the Fairyland around us. She ran out of time and she ran out of money. If Opal Whiteley had Microsoft Word, this book would be a classic today. She constantly, like me, just constantly always editing things that she was writing, but she put the entire book together, like almost 300 pages and over 200 illustrations, put the entire book together in like 6 months. And people have looked all through it for years. I mean, you can criticize her childhood diary, but when it comes to the natural history and her observations about nature in the fairyland around us, they're all accurate, and several people have thought that she was wrong about whether a certain bird was in the Northwest or not, but she was accurate on every one of them. Now, at my webpage, you go to opalnet.org, you will find now these, what I call these Fairyland Diaries. And I pulled out every known piece of diary information that I had, diary entries, things that look like diaries in the fairyland around us, and came up with over 180 pieces that look like they're diary entries or reconstructed from diary entries. And to those I added 300 research notes. Got really obsessed with this, but I'm getting to the point where I want to get all the knowledge I have about Opal out of my head, and people have been wanting me to write a book, but I'm always fighting new information, and it's hard for me to just say, okay, this is the final word, and because I found new information just several days ago. I found unedited diary entries of hers that you'll see in here. They've never been torn up and were never edited for publication. They're straight out of the original copybooks that she wrote in when she was 14 and 18 years old. So, but this is the file. When you go to opalnet.org and there's 5 of these files now. The Fairyland Diaries with the 300 research notes. And for those of you who get tired of me after a while, I put another version up here that doesn't have all these comments, but I want to show you what some of these comments are. This is cool. This is a note. She sent a lot of famous and influential people copies of her book, and this is a note that she wrote to author H.G. Wells, and it was found in his book when they dedicated it to from the Wells Library. And in it she says, I have the transcription of it, that she's been keeping a diary and observing nature since she was 4 years old. She said that to several people, but I really like this because it's H.G. Wells, so science fiction, maybe that's why I got it. And now let me show you the table of contents for the Fairyland Diaries, because went all through there and gave all these. There's 30 in these 180 diary. I'm actually up to closer to 190 diary entries now. 3 weeks ago I had 170. So, okay, the first thing that is, y'all can't see on the far left. Okay, I'm gonna try to fix that. The first thing that everybody is interested in are pets. And there are 35 new pets that are mentioned in the Fairyland around us. There's several that are in the childhood diary that are in the Fairyland around us. And several that are there. Now we can see a little better. Okay. And the next thing we have, I'm going to make the case today, and hopefully y'all will agree that these diary entries probably, a large percentage of them probably date, well, that was a mistake, probably date from when she was 9 and 10 years old there. And that's a pretty big claim, and so I've got the information to back it up. First of all, when you load up this PDF, which is pretty large, so it takes a little while to load, you get this table of contents. There are 3 diary entries that we know that she wrote when she was 9 and 10 years old. So we kind of use those to analyze and make a baseline from. That's the, who are the people mentioned? Where's the place that she's in? Who are the pets that she's got? I'll rattle off some of these chapters that are kind of now they're actually little stories that are told in the diary. She writes a nice entry about the courtship of her grandmother, little grandmother, and little grandfather, and her little grandmother growing up on the plantation. There's a good story about her Uncle Henry D. Pearson, a gold miner who happened to teach her poetry, the scientific names for pets, he's the one who really inspired. Without Henry Pearson, he's the forgotten angel father. Without Henry Pearson, we do not have Opal Whiteley like we know her at all. There's a great entry on page 37 of this document, Romeo the street waif and his caterpillar farm. Romeo is a little homeless kid. She had an office in the factory district of Los Angeles. Romeo is a little homeless kid, got a picture of him, and she befriended him and I think tried to turn him from juvenile delinquency into raising caterpillars. It's a great picture of him, I'll show you. And he can tell he's a homeless kid because he's barefoot and got bandages wrapped around his feet. That's what poor kids used to do. And then I've got a big appendixes to this. This main file is like nearly 120 pages, which gets to the diary entries, but also here's a PDF on the criteria I came up with for dating the diary entries and why I think I can make them stand up to be 9 or 10 years old. But the neat thing is, even if I'm wrong, even if she wrote every one of these diary entries when she was 20 years old, whether she intended to or not, she revealed a ton of family information that's not any place else. And because this book's been so hard to find, there have been not very many copies, not very many people have read it. And even when you sit down and read it, it's not meant to be read cover to cover like the diary is or most books are. It's more like a textbook. And beyond that, it's more to be read when you're in a place, like she has a chapter along the road. That is really kind of supposed to be read when you're out looking at nature along a road. It doesn't, and it's hard. Practically every biographer has said, and Benjamin Hoff, who just loved Opal, said, what do you call it? Hurriedly written, poorly edited, pathetically disorganized, yet filled with its own unique charm, which it is. And I think I found many of those charming things. Now, this PDF on dating the diary pages that you can find at opalnet.org, it has 10 criteria for how I came up with dating these. And some of the criteria are like her sense of theology develops as she gets older. As she gets older, she's expressing a lot more traditional, learned in church theology. When she's young, things are more wow. And there's an entry where she's really puzzled about why nature eats each other. If it's a perfect world, she's up in a tree trying to figure out why nature eats each other. And here's a really nice, we've got pictures of Opal during the time that she wrote the Fairyland Diaries, or 9 and 10. Here is the Walden School, payroll ledger for the Walden School. And that teacher right there, Nellie Williamson, I don't know if she's any relation or not, but Nellie Williamson, she's Opal's teacher in this, and she's Opal's teacher, I believe, in the Fairyland Around Her. So there's several diary entries where Opal talks about her teacher, and this teacher matches her. Plus we've got the dates in there. And now I'm going to start with this main big file and flip through it. Here's a list of the 35 pets. Now, the pets they don't have quite as long of names, but, here's a tree, a little small tree that she found growing by a flume out of some rocks. She named it Theocrates, because Theocrates said, "He who perseveres succeeds at last." So that is great. The tree Charlemagne that's in the childhood diary is in this. She briefly refers to it. A dog named Isaiah is in the childhood diary. There's a dog named Shep in here, and a dog named Rover, which I'm reminded of that place in the diary where the chore boy taunts her with there was a dog named Rover who was dead all over. She has 2 pet skunks. One of them is named Julius Caesar Napoleon. The other is Solomon Rehoboam. She's got a mouse named Josephus Jacobus Benjamin Solomon Rehoboam. A little better mouse, she says, is not as big as his name. And she's got 2 squirrels, Romeo and Juliet, a chipmunk named Pandora, who gets her into the worst trouble, and a raccoon named Achilles, because his foot was hurt, a pet deer named Maureen, and a collared lizard, you know, a Gila monster, that her Uncle Henry sent her from California. And that one's name is Salome. But think about that biblical story of Salome dancing for her uncle for the head of John the Baptist, because it comes up in the Fairyland around us. Now, the first thing in the Fairyland Diaries you come across is these 3 diary entries that we know are from, or pretty well know that they're from her 9th and 10th year. One of them is from inside the Fairyland around us, where she says that something happened, that she was 6 then and now she's 9. And got all these comments, like Opal uses all these words. I have a whole PDF you can read, 30 Opalisms, I call them, in the Fairyland around us. I'll define Opalism a little bit better. Here's a good example. Egghood. She's raising tadpoles, I think, from their egghood. Now, this piece of 9-year-old diary writing, she gave to the Atlantic Monthly in October 1919. The Atlantic Monthly, Ellery Sedgwick asked her, he'd seen the Fairyland around us, he'd seen all the diary entries. That's what he asked her if she kept the diary. So yes, they get the diary. She puts together these two diary entries from her, what she says is her 9th and 10th year, and gives them to him. And Ellery Sedgwick comes back and says, I want younger diary entries. Now, where does he get the idea that there are any younger diary entries? But I think that because he does see the Fairyland around us, there are several entries that are from the time of the childhood diary. But these, you see all these comments I've made. Here's a great picture. You've read the childhood. You remember Elsie and her young husband? This is Elsie, and there's little Harold, who gets the coal oil burn there. And that's the sister. That's the girl who's born in 1905 during the diary. That's Merle Scott. But that's Leela Garrett Scott, and without Leela Garrett, there's the comments over here. I really like how I go wild with comments, because, you know, Opal might write 2 sentences and I'll write 3 paragraphs about it. But for example, I really believe that the idea that she's French aristocracy comes from Leela Garrett Scott. And if you want to, if we have time, I'll pull up Michael Garrett's Wikipedia page, and you'll see cousin of the King of France, left France during the American Revolution to come fight with Lafayette, and was on part of the tribunal actually that decided the king's fate. But I mean, he was high nobility, and that's her next door neighbor during the time of the diary. They lived directly next door. So I think that's, anyway, move forward, try to get through. Hey, we're at page 10. We're going well. There is a reference to Angel Mother down in the 9-year-old diary, and doesn't say anything about her other than Angel Mother. Opal is trying to comfort a little girl whose mother has died of typhoid fever, and she tells her about Angel Mother, telling her about Beethoven. She uses this term. The doctor was very angry because typhoid fever was fairly preventable if you used the right sanitation. And has great thing where the doctor looked angry looks. Okay, now this is the 10-year-old diary entry from just a year later. And her father is in this, and throughout most of the book, her family is very, very well portrayed. Very kind. No hint of that she's an orphan or anything. however, we'll get to it. The things with the mother haven't changed so much. Here's a good Opalism, predicament. Here's an eventide, to mean evening. That's the picture of the Walton School. Here's another little Opalism. History class was, then arithmetic, then came spelling. And here, in the 9-year-old diary, the teacher is a woman. In the 10-year-old, the teacher is a man. I've got his name here. And this student, Mabel, is also in Fairyland around us. Now here's where this is where the diary entries from the Fairyland around us start. So basically, looking at those 9 and 10-year-old diaries, and just a couple of days ago I found 14 and 18-year-old diary entries. We can compare who she's writing about, her style, the way she uses language, the way to try to make a guess. Is this likely to be 9 or 10 or in that young age group? Or is this middle school, high school, or even young adult? One of the PDFs you'll find on the website is, I call Opal Whiteley's Uncommon Use of Language. So really the purpose of this talk today is I'm going to inspire you to go look at the website and read this out. And this is way too small to read, but what we call an Opalism is a phrase that has, like the normal subject, verb, object reversed, a phrase that's just not typical in ordinary English, or you should use the same word in the same sentence in really close proximity, or there's this stream of consciousness writing where like one sentence will be over 100 words, and one page will be one entire paragraph, just really tightly spaced. And counting, unusual ways of expressing numbers and counting. I believe Opal Whiteley probably had autism rather than schizophrenia, and people with autism, many of them love to count and are very good with it. And Opal counts everything. And the way she expressed, she says something is 20 trees and one distant. So 21 trees, but 20 trees and one distant. I'm gonna pull up this file here on the Opalisms and just run through several of them here. Actually, maybe I'll just get out the notes that I put together and read them off of here, because they're... At one point, she says, Karen and I started having this running joke where we do some of these Opalisms, like, here's a new word for you, wonderfulness. She's climbed this tree to see where a heron's nest is. She calls it Heron Town. It's out by Dorena and kind of where Cerro was, best I can figure. And she spends all day up there, forgets about school, tears her apron, comes down, and where she gets in trouble before, she says, I could tell them about all the wonderfulness of Heron Town. And she's got a great way of saying, listen to this about saying what age she is. A long time ago, before that birthday that made me 4 years old. A long time ago, before that birthday that made me 4 years old. So it's a memory of when she was 3 years old. There are two memories in the Fairyland around us of when Opal was 3 years old. And they're both just really, really cute. And those of you familiar with the story know that later she claimed that her memories didn't really come back to her until she was, it was like a case of recovered memories, didn't really come back to her until she was putting together the diary in Boston. And when she remembering and seeing what she saw when she was 6 and 7. But here in the Fairyland Around Us 2 years earlier, she's writing down 2 memories that are 3 years, that she says happened when she's 3 years old. It's always known she had a photographic memory. That's never been in doubt about Opal Whiteley, that she had a photographic memory. So I'll get to the 3-year-old memory here, but this is where the diary entries start, twilight and then night. This might be a reconstructed diary entry, but when you read it, last night I went into the forest, moonbeam fairies brighten the path that leads towards the cathedral and into the woods beyond. And it might have, you know, if you're going to take something like the diaries that we wrote and then you're going to publish it, whether it's the childhood diary or the Fairyland Around Us, aren't you going to edit it a little bit? Most of us would. Now, I've organized, the diary entries were scattered all throughout the Fairyland Around Us. And I pulled them all together in chronological order. Unfortunately, she did not put the years of these, but I've been making some guesses. And I put them in what I thought was the earliest sequence I could. So this is January, that has 10 days. The Fairyland Around Us is a nature book and a science book, so it's not really about people's, it's not telling stories like the story of Sadie McKibben or the Man Who Wears Gray Neckties like the childhood diary is. This book is a textbook for learning about nature. So the entries that are in, like January only has 10 diary entries. Let's skip forward to, oh, here's a nice picture. That's Opal's great-grandfather and great-grandmother there. Getting up to April, 18 diary entries. And June and July have about 40 diary, with nature being more active in those months. And because I sped forward, okay, there's a nice picture. And I didn't make this to really show on this screen here. I made it so to show on your screen at home. But here's a nice picture of Nellie Williamson, March 27th, 1907. We know it's March 27th, 1907, because there's a calendar on the blackboard right behind her. And every day is scratched off until you get to Wednesday, March 27th. And then when you look in the calendars, when did a Wednesday fall on March 27th? Well, that was 1907, which is when this woman is teaching there. And all these pictures I have in here were taken from the book, The Fairyland Around Us. This is good. This has been a tragical day. I guess you like the word magical, so you can do it, the word backwards as tragical too. Now, I'm going to scroll. I want to show you the rest of the things, so you can look at this on your own. I'm going to just show you these last really interesting diary entries that I remember. We've had at the U of O for a long time. She left them there. She left a couple of boxes of her stuff at the University of Oregon when she left. And there's a couple of her original notebooks in there that have a handful of diary entries. And I call this part of it Opal Unedited. These were never torn up. They're from when she was 14. Her diary was torn up when she was 12. They were never edited for publication. What she writes here comes directly out of the page. Here's a really nice paragraph, 1912, when she's 14, on the way to Row River. And she's starting to get involved in Christian Endeavor group now very heavily. And these entries are full of Christian phrases like praising Christ our Lord and Savior. The Fairyland Around Us, interestingly enough, is more of a Judeo-Christian light book. I think she was very aware that the audience she was writing for in Los Angeles, a lot of the mothers that she taught their kids, they were Jewish, so she didn't put the word Christ and Jesus only appear in the Fairyland Around Us twice, and both times they're referring to dates, not our Lord and Savior. But the word God is in Fairyland around us over 60 times easily. Now here's a handful of unedited diary entries that are just fascinating. It's November 1st to November 4th, 1916. That's when Oregon is voting for prohibition. Well, we voted for but we passed prohibition a few years earlier than it was passed nationally. And Opal campaigned tirelessly for prohibition. And this describes her going out on her campaigns. And it also has 3 places in there where she says she took care of baby brother. That would be Elwin Scott, who at the time of this writing would be about 2 years old. I've got a picture. Mother's not feeling well. Goes through, and twice in these 4 pages, she refers to her mother not feeling well and her having to do things, and her mother not wanting her to go do activities because she's needed around the house. Here, Pearl and Opal get into an argument over campaigning for prohibition. Pearl does not want to go out and campaign for prohibition, and Opal gets pretty upset about it, and so she's going to pray that Pearl does change her heart and go out and campaign with her. There's a really good part here where she's talking about her father, Papa, she calls him here. And she only lets him kiss her on the forehead because she's going to save her lips. She's going to be pure, save her lips for the one man that she's going to fall in love with. So this is when she's about 18. And he's just lost his job. Election day, Oregon votes for prohibition. Opal's real happy. Another mention that her mother is ill. What makes these poignant and really kind of grabbed me when I read them is that I know these were written November 1916, and Mrs. Whiteley is going to die 7 months later in May 1917. And just, she's not feeling well. That just kind of, just knowing that something was going to happen to her after reading this diary entry where she's really sick. So you see all these, PDF, yeah, I'm up to over 360 comments in here. So if you like to read stuff that I come up with, this is the place for you to get lost for an afternoon. But if you want to see just what Opal wrote herself, I have a PDF here without the research notes, and just without, you could print this out. And look really well if you printed this out. I thought about publishing it in book form. Original idea was to do an anthology. Thing is, I've got 70 pictures in here. You know how expensive that is to print. This book was for the wealthy. It was phenomenally expensive to print. Here's a lovely photo of Opal and possibly in Colton, Washington, playing with lambs. Now, the other PDFs, again, dating the diary entries, because if you really get interested in it, this is fascinating about how she does the diary entries. But the real thing that I found in here that was very startling to me was this man. Here is, if you really want to go down the Opal rabbit hole deep, read this PDF, about almost 50 pages long, on this man here, Henry David Pearson. He's her great uncle. Without him, we do not have the educated Opal Whiteley that we have. He's been virtually forgotten, but he may be the real angel father. And I'll briefly tell you why. It's why he may be angel father. He does everything Opal Whiteley's French angel father did. And they both got the same first names and middle initial, Henry D. Henry D. Pearson is born in Georgia in 1862. He's named for Henry David Thoreau. What does that tell us? Oddly enough, during the Civil War, his family, he was born to a family of people who had abolitionist sympathies. You don't find many kids born in Georgia during the Civil War named Henry David Thoreau. He was blamed with starting it. But both names, so that tells you that the family he came from is fairly educated, fairly progressive. So anyway, both men are said to have taught Opal about natural sciences and nature, poetry, Latin names for things. Both traveled to the far lands. Whoops, I meant to make that. Yeah, whoops. Both traveled afar. Pearson went to Alaska and South America. Both have light-colored eyes. Blue, the prince is blue, and Henry Pearson's are some kind of hazel or blue or something. And but what biographers have said about the guy can fit on just a couple of pages. Here's a picture of him with his sister, Opal's maternal grandmother, Atchison Scott. And he is, I'm going to go way to the, he's a close associate with Dr. Oglesby. Doc Oglesby, who was so famous in Oregon history and Cottage Grove history. He helped, he's credited with discovering the Annie Knox mine, which was the mine that proved that there was not just gold up in Bohemia, but there was a lot of gold. That was a really important discovery. Now, how important was he to Opal? Here's what she told 1915. He died in 1914 of tuberculosis. Here's what she told the Sentinel in 1915 when they did an article about it. Because in the Sentinel, she says, she attributes much of her interest in nature to an uncle, Henry Pearson, a pioneer miner known all along the Pacific coast who died last year. He used to tell me of nature, and now, though he's dead, his thoughts can live on because I'm learning those things he wanted me to know. That is a really, I mean, think about it. He's not really dead because even though he's dead, his thoughts are living on in her, and she's learning the things that he wants her to know. That's an extremely close uncle-niece relationship. That sounds like more like a father-daughter relationship, but yeah, it's a, and he adds, I'll show you these pictures. He's in Fossil, Oregon. On your own home screen, these will look a lot better. This is him in Fossil, Oregon, the late 1800s. This is our own Dr. Oglesby in the pictures with him. I found these pictures were owned by a family member altogether. And then down here in the lower right and lower left, you'll see a picture with a woman who is so hauntingly looks exactly like Opal. It could be her mother. I mean, she just looks so haunting. And all these people have very darkish skin. Maybe they're Basque, maybe they're Mexico, Spain, and here are their kids. But I know Oglesby and I know Henry Pearson, but I don't know who these people are down here. And that's just, you know, I can't quit this thing until I figure who those people are in the pictures. Now, when you read through this, you know, actually the page without the comments does make a good page to read, like on your phone or tablet or at night, because it has got a lot in these. A lot of them are a lot of these stories, they're much shorter than the ones in the diary. Some of these diary entries are only 4 sentences long, 3 sentences long. Some are really long. But when you read them, you'll be aware that they have a fragment. There's a fragmentary. It's not hard to convince yourself when you read these Fairyland diaries that they were put together from an original diary that was torn up, because it does read like they're just fragments of what is originally a longer piece. And kind of as the real proof, yeah, the real proof of this, and I saved this for last, because I probably, and you can't see it. Okay, trust me. Probably wouldn't be standing up here today if Katie Vaughn in 1999 hadn't thrown a 100th birthday party for the Dorena Post Office. And I went to that, and I had a display about Opal. And this is on the website too, you can find it. And I had a website about, I had a thing about Opal. Sorry, I messed it up even more. And in the room, one of the most remarkable things that ever happened to me, in the room walks this woman, and she's carrying a really big book. Oh, folks, I really apologize. She's carrying a really big book. And she comes up to me and just thrusts this book in my face and says, here, something may happen to me, and I want to make sure this book gets in good hands, because my kids are just going to fight over it. And look at it's the 1905 History of Central Oregon. If you're familiar with the book, it's about 4 inches thick. It's got a lot about Oglesby in there too. Dr. Oglesby was mayor of Fossil, Limati, and Junction City, in addition to being a medical doctor at a gold mine. But now I've lost where I was before.
The book. She handed you the book.
And thank you. I would have gotten back there. Thank you. She walks in, just pushes this book that's like in my face, like just literally in my face. Who should I give it to? And I open this book, and you know, it looks like an ornate family Bible. And I open it really carefully, and right where I opened it up, there's this folded up piece of paper. And I just gently undid it, and as soon as I saw that, my blood ran cold. I knew I was looking at a torn up piece of Opal Whiteley's diary. I knew her handwriting well enough. Almost jumped up yelling, hey, look what I found, look what I found. A piece of Opal's torn up diary. But like a nut. I spent a couple of years verifying that it was Opal's handwriting. Got 2 experts to look at it. It is Opal's handwriting. It's the top right piece. Take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, tear it down one side, turn on its side, and tear it again. This is the top left where she started off Dear Composition, to write Dear Composition book, and the other side to it. And that piece of paper was never out of Dorena, Oregon. And so it verifies that her diary was torn up. It's in the U of O Special Collections Library. Verifies that her diary was torn up when she said it was. Yeah, it's sorry you can't see it because it's a wonderful little.
There it is.
Yeah, you can almost see it there. There. Click on it. Well, and this is, I think, the second side. She's got several girls' names in that. Fairy and Lizzie Wicks are with her that day, and then so I'm going to open up for questions because we're running. If you want to read the full Fairyland around us online, like Opal printed it, it's really neat now. The link is on my website. It can be frustrating because everybody has noticed how she switches tense, and suddenly she'll be in the middle of a narrative and just start throwing questions in. And it switches from place to place and time to time. But she didn't have an editor, and she was doing it in 6 months. And it's a remarkable achievement for a young woman, 19, turned 20. And it's, like I say, if she had Microsoft Word today, this book would be a classic. Because nobody's ever, Teddy Roosevelt wrote the last letter of his life to Opal because he thought he found an error. Poor man, he died, he was wrong. Turned out Opal was right about this. Oh, and there's one little final thing I'll go ahead and leave you with here. It's there's a wonderful poem in the early morning, and Tom, my friend Tom Romano here, he's an artist illustrator. He contributed this picture here of Opal teaching a class in the cathedral. And that's in our cathedral. Okay, this is great. A Christmas tree for the Chickadees. December 24th. Now here's what's really interesting. Chickadees were among my first friends. It was in the winter that I learned to know them. In the winter when the snow was on the ground. I was 3 then and had my daily lunch counter for the birds on the windowsill. Now here's another memory of when she's 3. Now she says she's got a lunch counter. You know, a kid that's raised around logging camps or a school is going to know a lunch counter. Unfortunately, a kid raised in European palaces probably won't know what a lunch counter is when she's 3 years old. You know, maybe it's accommodated, but you know, and I'll allow that the woman Opal says was her angel mother was an archduchess from Austria and did speak multiple languages. So who knows? But these 3-year-old memories in the fairyland around us are just priceless because later she either denies being able to read very much or you know, just changes her story quite a bit. And unfortunately, there are no Chickadees in Europe. Thanks to the internet now, you can do a quick search, are there Chickadees in Europe? No, if she's 3 years old remembering Chickadees, she's with the kidnappers. Yeah, doesn't really read it like she's being kidnapped either. But it's an amazing story. The biggest mystery to me, this man here, Henry Pearson, because he's the key to so much of it, and the reason why he hasn't been more isn't known about him. In Boston, she denied he had it, despite 11 times in the fairyland around us, her having him in the most glowing terms in the fairyland around us. 11 times in Boston, she denied he had any influence. And the people in Boston went with it. Simple reason. I mean, especially older people in here. Do you think that the people on the East Coast, like Boston, do you think they look down on people on the West a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
They could not believe that a child so bright, or young woman so bright as Opal, could have had ordinary parents or been taught by, Ellery Sedgwick called what he knew of Henry Pearson a rough miner. He couldn't have taught Opal anything. Like, he didn't allow that this rough miner owned a copy of Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars that Opal used to pick names for pets from. That's one of her sources, which you can't make that up. But yeah, one thing I like about doing what I put together here is it validates the real people in her life and the real influences that they have. And Henry Pearson shouldn't be forgotten. He was a very important person in the development of the mining district, and like I say, without him, you do not have the Opal Whiteley that we have today. So hope you go to my website, opalnet.org, and look and find the 5 different PDFs that my wife has been so tolerant to read and edit and just put up with me. I mean, if I'd had a part-time job at McDonald's, I'd probably made $500,000 on it by now. But I don't watch football games very often, so that, you know, the time people put into one hobby is kind of what I put into this one. And it's been a real joy, and I so much appreciate all y'all coming out this morning.
if anyone has questions for Steve. I have one. And how many copies of the Fairyland Diaries were originally published?
About 100 that had binders, and there's maybe 100 other of just the text. Oh, very important, don't turn that camera off. I forgot to tell you, you can't leave. I forgot to tell you, I promised it in the news release, what happened to all of her diary entries. I know exactly what happened to all of her diary entries, and because that's bedeviled researchers, but in the middle 1970s, to the English courts, it was clear Opal was not going to get out of Knapsbury. They had all of her stuff in storage. They got 2 high school boys or young college-age boys, one named Donovan, one named McBride. McBride grew up to become her solicitor and advocate in Knapsbury, and she's buried in that aristocratic cemetery, Highgate. You can only get in Highgate if you're an aristocrat, because he saved money to buy the tomb. But they told me and a friend of mine when they were late high school, early college, they were hired to go through all this stuff, find anything that looked valuable, turn it over to this church. And they have clear memories of seeing boxes of torn up little pieces of paper that had crayon writings. The diary really did exist at one time like that. And they have, and one of them picked up, he just grabbed a handful of those torn up pieces of paper and a copy of Fairyland around us, something else. And he's still got those today. The fragments are in, I think, University of London library now. But that's what happened. They were thrown away in the 1970s. They asked Opal if she wanted to pay for the storage, which she, being institutionalized, really couldn't. And she made the legal point of, hey, I'm in here against my will. You're the ones who should be paying for the storage. So, you know, that's what happened. They've been lost. Yeah, John.
In the story about the lost fragment of the diary that was recently recovered by you, the Witt sisters with Opal are along the Row River, and don't they see a big snake?
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of snake was that, and why would Opal and the 2 Witt sisters, especially Opal, who was nature-loving, throw objects at the snake?
Because it's a snake.
Well, but Opal loved everything, including snakes.
No, she didn't like weasels. Weasels, you know, are evil fairies. Weasels do not deserve proper names. There's one weasel in there, she calls it a Nero. So there are animals that she doesn't like.
Okay, there are some.
Yeah, she's complimentary about snakes, but she's with 2 girls. And what do 3 girls picnicking doing when they see a big snake? They don't invite it. There is a picture of 2 little children in the Fairyland around us watching a snake skin. But that was, what kind of, you know those big black snakes that we have here? What are the king snakes, or what are they called?
King snakes, garter snakes?
No, the big ones.
Rubber boas.
Rubber boas, yeah, rubber boas, that's what it is, yeah. And those are large, and they're not dangerous, but they're scary. And Cerro Gordo Mountain used to be called Rattlesnake Hill because that was the only place where they hadn't killed all the snakes off. But yeah, goes back, yeah.
Who did she cross to get in trouble with her? You talk about her being possibly autistic rather than. Who did she cross? What? I don't know that part of the story.
To get institutionalized?
Yeah.
She didn't cross anybody. It's a really sad story. At that time, psychiatry, it was right after World War II, 1948, psychiatry was highly respected. It was thought that psychiatry might even eliminate warfare because we're going to be able to learn what goes on in the human psyche and control things. A friend of hers, a patron, Mia Woodruff, who totally believed Opal's French story, totally. But she was getting old. All of Opal's supporters, all of her benefactors were very old. And she honestly believed that Opal could benefit from the new mental health treatment.
Oh gosh.
So she calls the mental health police, as I call them. They arrive there at 2:30 in the morning. And you know, suppose some guys 2:30 in the morning come to your house, they don't want to examine you, see how sane you are. It's not a real good time to do it. And within a month, the consulting psychiatrist writes a letter to Mia Woodruff saying that she should have a lobotomy at Dexter.
Oh my God.
We got the letter. And I think they did it, they just, that was thought that might help her. But the psychiatrist completely accepted that she was Princess Francois de Beverly Orleans. In England, you can't get buried in Highgate Cemetery without them thinking you're an aristocrat. So if she was a con artist, little Opal, we can be proud that she pulled off 2 of the most successful cons of the 20th century. And I do think the diary was partly written as a child and embellished as an adult. But the Frenchman and the, she pulled off 2. And nobody, and if she faked the diary, nobody has ever been able to figure out how. And that's I haven't either in over 20 years. I can think of people who might have helped her, but I really can't think of how she completely faked it, except how she added to it. Yes.
Well, it's like, because of her photographic memory, that would be a
Yes.
savant autism.
Right.
That shows so much in
Yes.
all of her work.
Counting things,
Yes.
printed and organizing.
Yes.
Yeah, and that.
Autism wasn't known then at all.
They called it idiot savants, but mostly those were people that were very visible. We've always had people in our neighborhoods that had a little bit of autism. It's been and in fact, we need it in the gene pool because there's where we get our accountants, our bookkeepers, people that double and triple check things. We gotta have that.
Yes.
So, Mayor, what did you have?
I have 2 questions, Steve. The first one is about where, in Fairyland, where did the illustrations and pictures come from?
Oh, okay, that's great. She ran out of time and money. The printer, because they reused printing plates in those days, they were lead, so they melted them down immediately. And she didn't pay him on time. He melted all the plates. They had made a run of 100, but they hadn't done the run with the pictures. And the press only did one thing at a time, so they did multiple runs. So she got from magazines, from stock photographs, all over. And for all these 100 books, she cut out these pictures, pasted them in there, and wrote captions. So each book is slightly different. Yeah.
My second question is, could you talk a little bit about stream of consciousness? Because I'm familiar with people like J.D. Salinger and Kerouac, who made a living off of that, but she predated them by 50 years.
I think maybe, I don't know what a better term is, but like, let's say you're really angry, and I think women tend to do this more than men. Men like paragraphs. And you can thank me for the paragraphs in here, because Opal tended to write long things without paragraphs. But I think just that rush of getting it all down, in one breathless out, just writing everything you can, just right then, because she gets in trouble with the mother a number of times in here, but each time it's more understandable. You kind of, I get sympathetic, Mrs. Whiting, what do you do with a child like this? Okay, Opal, you may not bring that raccoon into the house and give it milk and corn. You don't want a pet raccoon if you've got a farm. They'll eat your corn overnight. Anyway, you can't. So what does Opal do? She takes the corn and milk outside of the house to the raccoon. She gets in trouble for bringing a chipmunk in that gets loose during a dinner. Another time the raccoon comes in, and the raccoon steals this steak that they've got for a man's dinner, and they can't get to town to get another steak. The raccoon stole the steak. Another time the deer came in and stole the apples that were on the table that were being left for a church, a deacon or somebody. And each occasion, her mother had told her, don't let the animal in, but she left the door open, or she figured a way around it. She said, okay, I can't bring the pet in, but I can take stuff out to the pet. And yeah, I can't climb 100 feet in the air, but if I can climb 90, that's all right. See, and you get a real, I write in the comments over and over, we call it the strong-willed. Either she was very much that strong-willed child that we've heard about, you know, this kid that just comes out just with their own agenda, or she had autism, which creates that same kind of strong will. And I think it's the latter, yeah. Any more? Yeah, yes?
I just wonder about how much, like, we always seem when we have these Opal Talks, people like focus on the mystery behind the realism of the book, and people talk about, you know, if she had autism or not, but I wonder if the real conversation is more about what she wrote about and her connection to nature and kind of also the beautiful landmarks that we are so fortunate to live here and experience ourselves. And I've just kind of noticed with the interactions I've had with different people in the community, you know, people are kind of all different ways.
So it's about the mystery of Cottage Grove.
Yeah.
Because this is where it happened, yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it's about the mystery of Cottage Grove, but my wife was talking to me about the same thing you're bringing up, that, you know, Opal's writings today may have more relevance than what they did years ago. There's 2 or 3 great places in the Fairyland around us where she says she and her friends are only picking flowers for people who are invalids or can't get outside and enjoy them. Otherwise, you don't pick the flower, you leave it there so it can pollinate more flowers and make the world more beautiful.
Conservative.
That was something she taught really frequently. Pick flowers for people who can't go outside and see them, but don't just pick flowers to be picking flowers, because, you know, they're going to make seed babies. But yeah, it's and I think her view of logging, there's a term that fell out of favor, but I liked it, wise use. And, you know, I think that she was a child of loggers and miners, but I think the way she would have done it might have been very different. Yeah, she would have done it much more. And cut this tree, not that tree.
Right.
Yeah, and yeah, if she hadn't left Oregon, you know, I often wonder if she hadn't left Oregon, I think she would be really somebody very important in Oregon history, and change it. It was, yeah, even well, leaving Oregon, which her mother died in May of 1917, left 4 kids behind. Opal was the oldest girl. You women know that if you're the oldest girl and you got 4 siblings younger than you, you're going to be the one to be mama when she's gone. I just talk to women a lot in that position. I think that was one big reason why she left Oregon, because I just don't think she wanted to be the mama to the 4 younger kids.
Or maybe could be.
Pardon?
Or maybe even could be.
Yeah, yeah. And I've talked to women on both sides of that who had to fill in for mother after she died. They were the oldest daughter. And their younger siblings to this day, they have issues with them. And I've talked to women who are among like one of those 4 daughters and raised by an older sister when mom died. And it isn't, oh, I so appreciate how you stepped in there when mom passed away. It isn't like that at all. So, yes.
I have a question for you. Given all the research and everything that you know about her, and given the time frame that she existed, would you compare her to being, I guess, the West Coast version and the pre-Rachel Carson to the East Coast?
Yeah.
In terms of recognizing
Yeah.
the importance of nature and how the environment and helping.
In the childhood diary, she's looking at the wow of nature. That's a beautiful tree. I love the tree. It talks to it. In the Fairyland around us, she is a young scientist, and it's filled with Latin names. So, but it's also filled with lots of spiritual things about God. But it's not. You can't pin it down and say this is a Christian book or this was written for Jewish people. There's a nice thing about Muhammad in there, or Muhammad liking a flower that Muhammad liked, and Buddha, so something about Buddha. So she was around that kind of diverse folks, but yeah, that's
Wait,
the scientist in there. She
I
would
wonder
have,
if Rachel was influenced by her, whether unintentionally or intentionally. What
I don't know.
gravitated her to recognize that, humans
Yeah.
could be potentially longer.
But, Opal was so forgotten for so long, till the 1980s, when Benjamin Hop published his book, because of that controversy over whether or not she was whether or not she was French. And, if she had just had two controversies, either did I write this book when I was a kid or not, or the Whiteleys my real family. If she had just gone with one of those mysteries, I think she would have been a lot more famous. But having two makes it real difficult. And like Uncle Henry in the Fairyland around us, I think if the Atlantic Monthly had really known who Uncle Henry was and had sat down and talked to him, they would have, and Leela Garut, they would have said, child, this is where you're getting your French ideas and this is
Yeah.
where you got your education. But they didn't really think that much of Westerners, and that idea that if you have noble blood or high-born blood, you can rise up under any circumstances. The Tarzan books, he's in English, he's Lord Greystoke, but he's a white Lord Greystoke. Of course he can rise to become king of the jungle. Freckles, one of the most popular books for girls by Jean Stratton Porter. Freckles raises himself in the Limberlost. Into the book, his Irish noble family comes to find him. Literature is filled with these stories of lost nobility that rise up in an obscure place, and that's kind of the storyline she wanted to follow. Yes, Cindy?
What more can Cottage Grove do to market Opal, to bring Opal fans here? And can we do kind of an Opal tour? What do you recommend we do to turn this great story into something that will benefit all of us?
Well, we've got the tour brochures that Alice did that are just beautiful, and it's on the website you can download. We get a few tourists from England. There's a handful a year that come through. I guess I should get out there and try to make her a national cause again. I'll give some real thought to that, because she's kind of that cult writer. Fans will seek her out and come here whether you do any marketing whatsoever.
Right.
And everybody's got a story for how they encountered Opal Whiteley in her book. Everybody, when they read her book, because it's not on the bestseller list for a long time, but somebody gave it to them, or it fell out of the library shelf and they picked it up, or the last thing my mother said was, read this, before she died. A woman actually told me that. The last thing her mother did was give her a copy of Opal Whiteley's book. So, yeah, that's a good question, Cindy. And thinking about schools teaching Opal, it's, one hand, I'm trying to get through what a wonderfully sainted, historically important woman in Cottage Grove called that little liar syndrome. That little liar. A lot of us in here know who said that, who made that fable, that dear woman, sainted woman. But yeah, that's tough to get the schools to. If people think that she lied about this and that, then it's tough to get a teacher to say, you don't want to teach that. But and I've written I need to put it up on the website, a good defense about that, because we might judge her more harshly. We don't really care that Ernest Hemingway or William Faulkner, you wouldn't want that man for a neighbor. You wouldn't want him to live within 10 miles of William Faulkner. He was that mean. He was that nasty to everybody around him. He kicked his daughter one time and said she wasn't important. Nobody remembers Shakespeare's daughter. So we give people a pass on what they're like. With Opal, we've got pretty strict rules, you know. She's got to be, you know, telling the truth about this and that. Where other people, well, I guess she does say her book is an autobiography, it is her diary, so that's, and I think most of it is, but I think it was vastly changed.
Are there other universities around, besides University of Oregon, that are part of this Opal Research Network?
University of London, Massachusetts, whatever they call it back there, the Historical Society, but they're connected with Harvard or something. And in a left field way, down in Los Angeles, the Museum for Loomis, Charles Fletcher Loomis, who we've kind of forgotten who he was, but he was a giant in preserving Southwest history. He let Opal stay at his house. He molested Opal. There's this incredible story where, and he writes about it in his diary. And his biographer that I've talked to, his biography is Phil. He was one of these real academic lecturers who preyed on young graduate students and young women. And there used to be a lot, and he was tops at it. Which, by the way, if you ever read about Opal Whiteley possibly being in Los Angeles and reading and making notes in the margins of books that are about Prince Henri d'Orleans, that's not Opal's handwriting. It's Charles Loomis's handwriting. He would go through the Los Angeles Public Library and correct information in books. And Opal's, but the books on Prince Henri, Opal is blamed for making those entries. Nah, it's not her handwriting. No.
Is that the Museum of the West in Pasadena? I think I went
Yes.
past it one day.
Yes.
Yeah, so they may have some Opal info.
Yes, and when I sent the biographer a picture of Opal. He sent me back a 3-word email. She's his type. Took one look at a picture of Opal and that she's his type. And he writes about her in his diary. He says she has nice, chest. And he gets really mad with her because he's got a trap door built into this bedroom where he lets girls stay. And he'll come up out of the trap door. And she kicked him in between the legs and then took a hammer and nails and hammered this rosewood door shut. In his diary, there's nothing about him coming out of the trap door and grabbing her and trying to rape her there in the bed, which that's exactly what he's trying to do. It happened but with at least two men in Los Angeles. But she nails the rosewood. In his diary, he writes a long passage about how angry he is. She's nailed the rosewood, put a nail in this expensive rosewood door. But yet, the girl, Opal, when she went to Los Angeles to write Fairyland Around Us, was very different from, she was a girl. She believed in love and the world and God would make everything right, and that people in Los Angeles are going to be filled with wonderful people. I think she got molested at least twice, seriously, and I think the woman who left Los Angeles was much jaded, much wiser, and her life totally changes. Before that, it's all about service. She talks about the life of service in the Fairyland Around Us. But after Los Angeles, I think that's when it really becomes jaded, and that she's more interested in. She sees everybody else grabbing for themselves.
Do you write about that?
Have you
written about that, or is that written out somewhere?
Yeah. I do have it. Yeah, I do have it, a little bit of it in the Fairyland Around Us, as comments in the Fairyland Around Us. Yes.
I wonder if you have uncovered any references to Native Americans.
Yes.
And because one of the things in my research is that this is her consciousness about nature is actually very normalized Native American consciousness of connecting with nature and speaking with plants as if they were relatives and such of that nature. And so it's actually not a very different thing. And she has the picture where she, of course, made her outfit to
Yeah.
look so I just wonder what you have was covered there.
Yes, there's one or two places in the Fairyland around us. Her grandfather speaks real nicely about I think the Paiute Indians that were in the Chief Joseph. And anyway, she speaks really. She's writing about camas bulbs that are blue,
Right.
and Chief Joseph. And her grandfather tells her about that the Indians were just trying to protect their camas, their food, and it's a really good part. There was, I think her family was very tolerant like that, and it could be that she's got Native American blood in her. It could also be because her great-grandmother and her great-grandfather were both raised on plantations and came out west in the 1840s when you could still bring slaves. And like, look at this picture here, it's too much light. But you show this picture and a couple of diary entries that I've got that she wrote about her great-grandfather and grandmother on the plantation. You show those to anybody who grew up in the South, said, that kid's got African-American blood. Reading what she wrote about her great-grandfather and grandmother and their courtship and their relationship. And then just seeing pictures of her and the other members of the family. Sometimes it's very striking. But then I've shown those same pictures to people from all over, Basques and Spain and every place, And this picture I like because she hasn't got on the white powder that she usually wears in photographs. All photographers kept white powder for them.
We probably have time for one more question,
Okay.
and then we want to have some time to look at the exhibits.
I'm wondering if any of her genetic material exists. Is there hair or, a hair like people used to save hair?
Yeah, I haven't seen a hair. There would be the licking on the back of stamps that she said, things that she owned. Have to dig her up, but
Well, I wonder if the genealogy, the DNA sampling we have today, if it was any genetic material.
if we can get directly from her. But then the curveball comes in. Suppose she's the child of somebody else in the Scott family, but not her stated parents.
No, but her.
Yeah, find out what the DNA is, on that. But then we might lose our tourist attraction. You see, we can't do anything but lose the tourist attraction.
No. You can make her part of Black History Month.
Yes, she's 9 years old there.
Swept under that desk and there was 6 of the old double ones there. The first year I went to school, I was sitting in one of them double ones.
He went to the Walden School, and she talks about having a seatmate, a double, which is a double from the
Yeah, there
double.
was only 6 sets there, but there was 44 people in it, and she was one of them. And that was in 1936. I don't know what had happened, but there was 44 people there in 1907, and there was 21 of us in 36.
Yeah, they built more schools, so yeah.
Yeah.
That must be it.
Starved out and left is what happened.
That could be
Or a mill.
time.
Thanks for pointing that out. I've noticed there are a lot of kids in that class picture,
Yeah.
but I hadn't counted them. You're about right.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to go ahead and take a little time so that people can look at the exhibit. We have lots of material about Opal there.
And a
Thank you so
birthday
much for
party?
coming. Yeah, we talked about the birthday party. Again, that's going to be December 7th from 6 to 8 at the Axe and Fiddle. And that's to raise money for a case for the Public Library's Opal Whiteley collection. Steve is going to come back and talk to us in 2019 sometime about Dr. Oglesby and Bohemia Sharp. You can look at our Facebook page, Cottage Grove Historical Society, or go to our website, cghistory.org, to get our schedule of events and see when he's going to come back and talk to us again. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you.